This episode of Doc Talk is brought to you by First Bank. We're not just your neighborhood bank, we're your neighbors. Our local team lives up to the name, putting our customers and community first. To experience First Bank difference, stop by any of our 13 Knoxville area locations or visit firstbankonline.com. First Bank, member FDIC.
Hello, my name is Dr. Rob Page and welcome to Doc Talk. Doc Talk is a podcast that is produced by the Knoxville Academy of Medicine and features its physician members giving information to patients that are important in terms of making their healthcare decisions. And I feel fortunate to have with me today Dr. Clayton Bell. Dr. Bell is a physician at UT Medical Center, and he specializes in areas of integrative health.
Yes, sir.
And you are here today, first of all, tell us about integrative health. What does that involve?
Sure, absolutely. So a lot of people ask, what is integrative medicine? If you go to the very core and the very foundations of health, and you look at the things that we do on a daily basis that dictate whether we're essentially healthy and full of vitality and energy, or whether we eventually are going to be more predisposed to illnesses, especially chronic illnesses in our society, integrative medicine is really at the core of that. So what we do is we focus on things like proper nutrition, stress resiliency, adequate sleep, physical activity, positive relationships with people about us, and we incorporate other things too, even Eastern philosophy such as some Ayurveda, which I do, as well as things like meditation, consciousness cultivation, all these things, a lot of motivational interviewing. Essentially, it's medicine. It's everything that essentially helps your body to heal itself from the inside out.
But it's medicine without being sort of defined as what we classically think of as medicine,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And it's I think it at least from what you described, it's a different way for us to stay healthy. Because so much of medicine is focused upon patients after they're sick.
Right.
How do I treat you? What medicine do I give you? What do I treat you now? But actually, you focus on more of the what can I do to avoid having to do any of these things.
And it's a lot easier to prevent illness than it is to overcome it. It's really interesting because we think about traditional medicine, right? But really, traditional allopathic medicine's only been around for 100 plus years. The medicine that we're practicing has literally been around for thousands of years. And this is the way that a lot of cultures, whether it was more of the, Ayurveda, which has been around for 6,000 years, traditional Chinese medicine, even some of the Greco-Roman medicine, eventually Hippocrates. Food is medicine, right? And that's a Hippocrates quote, at least it's attributed to him. He probably took from someone else.
Well, now you mentioned actually food is medicine, and that's actually what you'd like to talk about today,
Sure.
And how food functions as medicine. So not medicine as we classically would think, but sort of give us sort of a general idea about how food can function as a medication.
So if you think about it, your body is essentially an internal pharmacy, right? I mean, so many of the medications that we use are either plant-based or they mimic something in our body, right? And so if you literally use your kitchen as a pharmacy or use your dish as a pharmacy, you can think about it with an F instead of a PH, that can radically change all the chemicals in your body. Really fascinating. So for instance, most chronic illnesses in our country today, whether it results in cancer, a heart attack, or stroke, or diabetes, or metabolic syndrome, what have you, at the underlying core, you have chronic inflammation. Mm-hmm. And people don't think about it, but if you literally go get a cupcake or eat some donuts that someone brought to work, that's going to spike inflammation biomarkers in the body for several hours. And that, every now and then, not a big deal. If it's your birthday, who cares? Have fun. But when you're doing it day in, day out, especially if you're insulting your body with that 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times a day or every single meal, and you're not getting adequate rest, what have you, you're not getting good physical activity, those, say, reactive oxygen species and chronic inflammatory cytokines will actually lead to a lot of diseases in the human body. And food is more than just taste good. Food is literally the molecular building blocks of your body. So I like to tell people, essentially it's like the Legos. So if you want to build a beautiful castle, you need a really strong foundation and you need some pieces to work with. It's kind of like, let's take your vehicle, right? Like, what kind of car do you drive?
It's a Suburban.
Nice. So you drive Suburban, right? And so in that Suburban, you would want to take it and get it serviced, and I would think you'd want to put good quality fuel in there, mm-hmm. right? And you would want to put oil in there, right? Well, as a really basic thing, so many people are dehydrated chronically. They literally don't drink water, or they drink 1 or 2 glasses of water a day, and it's essentially like running the Suburban with no oil in there. Mm-hmm. Eventually, the engine is going to seize up, especially when you think about the body being between 50 and 60% water based on how old we are. And the food is going to be the fuel. So if you want to put rocket fuel in there, you're going to run out like a Lamborghini. And if you want to put old toxic sludge in there, which is essentially going to be fast food and most restaurant food or fried foods and things that I grew up eating.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
In Arkansas.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. It's amazing that the human body can carry on as long as it can.
So you mentioned food as medicine, but in reality, it's not so much as the foods that we eat, but the foods that we don't eat.
Well, it's a combination of both, right? So I mean, I think if you look at Americans, let's say that take this standard American diet, aka the SAD diet, right? If you eat the standard American diet, you should not a good thing, not a bad thing, not a moral thing, right? This is not a heaven and hell moral issue, but literally action reaction. You should expect to get diabetes, heart attack, a stroke, metabolic conditions, cancer, and everything else under the sun. You should experience those conditions based on the nutritional intake and the effects it's having on our body. Now, if we go back to more traditional diets, right, or you look at, say, a Mediterranean diet, which has so much great evidence behind it, and it's more of a plant-based diet, right? There's a lot of good healthy oils and nuts in there, right? You use fish, but you don't have a lot of red meats and those type of things. People live longer. They're healthier, you know, and so even if you look at more of a, like I grew up on a cow farm in Arkansas, right? And like for us, you know, we didn't really cook at home, so it was like Tony's Pizzas or, you know, a lot of McDonald's, you know, a lot of soda pop. I thought you were supposed to have cavities when you went to the dentist every time.
That's exactly. Yeah.
That was normal. Candy. We had a Coke full of 50. We had a fridge full of 50 different types of Coke at my house. You know, and candy out the wazoo and chips and everything else. So that will make people sick, right? Now, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can either get rid of those things, right? Or if you want to buffer, which most people would prefer to do, you add in things, right? So if I'm going to have a cheeseburger, which I know is going to essentially, it's not a bad thing. It tastes great, right? But it's essentially going to clog my arteries and lead to things like heart attacks and colorectal cancer and things like that. I can buffer it by adding, say, cruciferous vegetables in there. They're going to help me detoxify some of those carcinogens. Okay, so you can buffer too. You can use antioxidant spices, things like ginger, cumin, or turmeric, and that. So sorry, I can see your.
No. It just is curious to me because you know. So you're not talking about, you know, a patient who comes in and necessarily having to, you know, because I think the prospect of a lot of patients to have to completely change their diet is just overwhelming for them.
Oh,
especially,
yeah, it is. Totally
especially for people my age. You know, you get to certain habits. And, you get to certain points. So, but what you're saying is that you necessarily don't have to change everything. Is you can modify it to a certain extent.
Absolutely.
To where not only you can maybe have some of those things that you do like, but then even on top of that add other ingredients or spices or vegetables or other things to your diet that will actually help offset some of that, some of what you're eating.
Yeah,
so.
and depending on, let's say, your medical condition, right, you can actually have some really specific foods that might be really, really good for you with that medical condition. So, for instance, I had a woman that came into the clinic today. She had a history of breast cancer and endometrial cancer, and she had a BRCA mutation, right? So she's very, very, very high risk for future breast cancers and what have you. So there's certain foods we can actually use to detoxify excess estrogen from the body. So foods that have iodine can do that. And a lot of women, surprisingly, and this never gets checked by doctors because we don't think about it, but are really iodine deficient. Okay, but iodine is going to detoxify extra estrogen. Cruciferous vegetables are going to do that. So that could be your collard greens, your kale, your broccoli, your cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, what have you. That can get rid of extra estrogen from the body. There's other foods that actually work like SERMs, which tamoxifen is the classic medication that women get put on if you have breast cancer and you're premenopausal. But what people don't realize is, and this is a big misnomer amongst many clinicians, but organic soy products, tofu, tempeh, soy milk, all those things prevent breast cancer. So if you look at women in Japan who eat a lot of those foods traditionally as part of their diet, they don't have near the same breast cancer risk that we do here in America. Now, when they come to America and adopt our diet, they have the same cancer ratios.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned soy. I was under the impression that somehow eating soy would increase estrogen levels.
Great question, and that's what a lot of people think. And the reason is because soy is a phytoestrogen. Okay, and so that basically means it's a plant-based estrogen. So it does actually bind to the estrogen receptors. Now, what people don't realize is there's two different types of estrogen receptors, right? So you have alpha receptors, which are going to essentially increase breast proliferation, and you have beta receptors, which are actually going to decrease it. So soy works it's kind of a double hit. So in one way, it'll actually bind preferentially to the beta receptor. So it's actually going to decrease breast tissue growth, which is what you want if you want to decrease cancer.
Right.
The other thing it does, it actually works like a SERM, like a selective estrogen receptor modulator. It works like tamoxifen. It will actually go in and bind that alpha receptor, so it's kind of like you had a big catcher's mitt, and instead of throwing a baseball or softball in there, you're throwing a golf ball in there. And so you're not getting the same reaction.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. No, no. So I was going to say. So essentially, what you're saying is that it does have a tendency to increase it, or at least it affects these receptors. But
it affects the receptor, not actually estrogen itself, but it does. It does interact with those receptors in a positive way for breast cancer patients.
Because for some reason I had read at some point that there were some studies in the literature about patients who had a history of breast cancer. They should try to avoid soy products.
So that's all old information. If you start to get more into like all the recent articles in PubMed, it's very, very clear in the scientific literature. And unfortunately, there's a lot of information on the internet that's not the PubMed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's
Dr. Google is not the best source of information.
So
yes.
There is a study. The only study I'm aware of that has deleterious effects of breast cancer is actually done in mice, but they gave the mice the equivalent of pounds and pounds and pounds of soy a day. So at some threshold, it might be deleterious. But literally eating even a serving a day, having a couple glasses of soy milk a day. I actually saw a study, and I wanted to fact check it because it just didn't even seem real. But literally having a glass or two of soy milk a day decreased breast cancer mortality by over 50%.
Wow!
After women were actually diagnosed with breast cancer.
Now you mentioned another word in there that I'd like to talk about foods as medicine. You mentioned organic. You talk about organic type foods. Now, is it important when we're eating these type vegetables that we actually look for that label on there that these things are organic?
So I think if, let's say you are doing really well financially, right? And you can spend your money on whatever you want. Obviously, health is the best thing to invest in. So if you are in the space where you can buy everything organic, God bless you, do it. For most people, that's not a reality.
Right.
So what I really recommend is people go by the environmental working groups, Dirty Dozen and Clean 15. And you can just Google that, Dirty Dozen, Clean 15. So Dirty Dozen are foods that you really want to get organic. And those are essentially going to be like, say, fruits and vegetables that you're going to eat the skin of. So think like strawberries or apples. They're going to be really laden with pesticides if they're commercially produced. There's other foods at the Clean 15, like, say, avocados. I'm not going to spend $4 on an organic avocado when I can buy one for $1. You know?
Right, and you're not doing anything with the exterior.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, bananas are that way. You know, I still get the organic bananas because they're cheap and it's probably better, environmental practices. Right. But so I would do the Dirty Dozen, I would buy organic, okay? And then for me, I just don't buy it if it's really expensive. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just won't buy that food. I'll buy the kale instead.
Gotcha.
I'll buy something cheaper that is. The other thing though, and I'm sorry, I don't.
No. You're perfect. I was gonna say, I'm trying to digest all this because there's such a ton of information.
No pun intended, right?
Exactly.
The other huge classification of foods that I would really highly recommend to get organic are meats.
Okay.
So when you're going to eat meat, enjoy the meat. Don't villainize it. I'm not telling everyone to go vegan or even vegetarian for that matter. But when you do eat meat, please get organic, grass-fed, free-range, pasture-raised, wild-caught every single time. So I grew up on a cow farm. I'm an animal science major. Being an animal science major at University of Arkansas actually turned me vegetarian for about 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
Then when I lived in Haiti, I remember the nurse telling me, you're so spoiled, you can say no to meat, because that was like the once a month they were going to kill the chicken to feed us for a big event.
Or the goat, yeah.
Or the goat, yeah. So then I started eating some meat again down there. But even now, so I personally eat more of a plant-based diet, but I'll eat organic chicken a few times a week or some wild-caught fish, But it's just a different animal, literally. So animals like, say, cattle, so I grew up on a cow farm, right? They have a 4-chamber stomach. They're literally made to eat grass, okay? And that grass creates basically different short-chain fatty acids to feed the bacteria in their gut, and eventually, it helps make, say, the tissue, okay? And it's going to have a lot more anti-inflammatory omega-3 fatty acids, which is what we want when we eat salmon, right? That's why salmon and walnuts are so great.
Oh, yeah.
If you eat factory farm beef, or you go to a local restaurant and get it, right? Now, there are a couple exceptions out there that do carry some, local farmed grass-fed beef. But if you go out there and get that or ground chuck from Walmart, you're going to get something that is going to be fed with a lot of grain. That's going to decrease the acidity of the gut. It's going to change the short-chain fatty acids. It's going to change the tissue and the actual flesh of the animal.
Wow.
And so you're going to get a lot more pro-inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids and arachidonic acid, which is going to predispose you to heart attacks, cancer, strokes, what have you.
Wow.
The other thing about commercially produced animals is they tend to line them up, and I don't know if you've ever been to a slaughterhouse, but they tend to line them up in a row. Animals see the animal in front of them getting killed. That's not a good thing. That would make us stressed out. So they actually have cortisol and other stress hormones circulating throughout their body that's going to get into their tissue. You're going to eat those stress hormones. You don't necessarily need that. And then you have things like recombinant bovine growth hormone that's put into milk, which might be one of the contributing factors to why women start going through menses so much younger now than they did even a couple decades ago.
Yeah.
So really interesting.
Well, I was going to say, and I'm not even going to get into chicken farming because I think that's something that we all have sort of seen in terms of like commercial chicken farms and the way that they're produced. It's pretty it's pretty horrific.
It is pretty wild, you know. And I didn't know this the other day. I saw a report, and a patient came to me and told me, but I was like, no, that can't be real. And I PubMeded it, and I was shocked. But a lot when they did these samples of even H. pylori found in the tissue of the chicken, they found that most of the samples were infected with that bacteria. What do you think about that for ulcers?
Absolutely.
And then there's certain cancers too that are linked to the chicken.
Oh,
so I still eat chicken, but I try to get.
I was going to say, it's really important information, and so much information that you've given us here about this today. So. Your office you're affiliated with University of Tennessee.
Yes, sir. Work at UT Medical Center.
So you're down at the medical center over there off campus.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a website or something at where we could go visit and get maybe additional information if we're interested in finding more?
Sure. Great question. So you definitely can look up, UT Medical Center, and you can even like Google my name. I have a lot of like videos that we've posted online, whether it's like Facebook things, what have you. If you're just looking for good access for information out there, I mean, a couple things I'd look at is I would look at that environmental working group, Dirty Dozen Clean 15.
And we'll put this information down at the bottom of the screen so the patients have that. So.
Perfect. There's a good resource that I use a lot, or used to use even more so. It's Nutritionfacts.org.
Okay.
And it's by a physician named Michael Greger. Now, I must warn you, he's a militant vegan. Okay, so everyone has an agenda, right? So you have to like see the agenda, but he presents some really fantastic research about the benefits of a plant-based diet.
Absolutely.
But,
and also, if we're interested in seeing you as a patient, if we're somebody who has we know where you're located. We're gonna put your phone number and your information.
One caveat to that, and I'm sorry, and this, you'll be one of the earlier people know. We just started kind of releasing the information. So I have a couple of associates in my office, like Dr. Chris Harris, who's absolutely fantastic. Dr. Rocio Hewitt, who I'm sure many of your members know very, very well. She's amazing. She's the one who actually started the Integrative Health Clinic there at UT Medical Center. She's a primary care doc. She has a long waiting list. But those are the folks you'd see. My schedule's actually booked till the end of the year.
Oh, wow.
And I am going to tragically say this is bittersweet. We're actually relocating. We're moving to the beach in Florida.
Oh, wow.
In January.
Oh, wow.
We've fallen in love with it. We have a toddler, and being on the beach with a toddler is really easy. So we're hitting the easy button on having kids. So I apologize,
but the resource will still be here.
The resource here.
Dr. Harris, Chris Harris, who was a urologist here in town.
Amazing. Chris is amazing.
And Rosario will be here too. And so we'll put that information down there so they can contact.
They're the best. Yeah, they're way better looking and way smarter than me. So go see them.
Well, I was going to say, Dr. Bell, thank you so much for visiting with us here today. You've given us just an incredible amount of information in a very short period of time about food being used as medicine, and about some of the important things that we need to be cognizant of as patients. Is not necessarily eating. And of course we all understand the sort of the ideas of a healthy diet, but what actually constitutes a healthy diet.
Yeah, and just have fun with it. And don't villainize the food. That's the biggest thing. Is don't play the blame game, and don't lash yourself. You don't need to. Just enjoy it. Enjoy it and move on.
And do the best you can.
Just do the best you can. That's all we can do.
So, and with that brings this episode of Doc Talk to a close. Doc Talk is a podcast that's produced by the Knoxville Academy of Medicine and features its physician members giving information to patients in terms of making their healthcare decisions. I'm Dr. Rob Page, and thank you so much for joining us.
This episode of Doc Talk is brought to you by First Bank. We're not just your neighborhood bank, we're your neighbors. Our local team lives up to the name, putting our customers and community first. To experience First Bank difference, stop by any of our 13 Knoxville area locations or visit firstbankonline.com. First Bank, member FDIC.